And you see an exuberance there, an absolute love of nature. They love observing details of animals. You have swallows mating and feeding each other and heralding the spring. But at the same time, there is no shrinking from realism and violence. So you have the ideal and you have also the realities of life juxtaposed, and it's just a beautiful way of looking at life.
With each new discovery at the site, the connection between Plato's Atlantis and these Minoan ruins intensified. Were the people of Atlantis and the Minoans perhaps one and the same?
If there was a historical truth behind Atlantis, then what we're looking at is the Minoans are probably, in fact almost certainly, the culture that Plato was talking about.
There's little doubt of their Atlantean roots among many people who live on Santorini today. Aware of the legend, they connected to their ancestors.
Of course Atlantis was here. We are the new people of this time, but we heard about it from our grandparents and our fathers.
If Atlantis really existed, it was Thera. In my confirmed belief, Thera has all the attributes that I would think Plato had in mind for his Atlantis. So if it's true, it's an excellent candidate. But I still come back to my basic skepticism and belief that Plato invented the story to convey a political and moral point about aggression and violence and greed. But I still like to think, in part of my mind, that some inspiration, some little bit of inspiration came to Plato from folk memories of a terrible destruction of a highly developed culture on the island of Thera.
Though the ruins of Akrotiri are perfectly preserved, no human skeletons have ever been found at the site. Where did the Minoans go? Could they have escaped the terrible blast? When we return, evidence that the survivors fled to other regions of the Mediterranean, becoming refugees who would exert a powerful influence on history. The mystery of Atlantis only deepens as we investigate the ancient people of the Mediterranean. After the explosion and sinking of Thera, what became of the island's highly advanced population? Excavations have never revealed any skeletons at Akrotiri. Art, pottery, and tools were perfectly preserved, but no sign of people. Many believe that before Thera was destroyed, small earthquakes and eruptions gave the inhabitants enough time to flee the island by boat. But to where? And what became of them? 300 miles away, at the headwaters of the Nile in Egypt, the ruins of an ancient settlement have been unearthed. Built by a technologically advanced society, it shows signs of Minoan influence, the same as the culture that once existed on Thera. Their presence in the region is also hinted at in another nearby place, in ancient Israel. Here, stories abound about a race known simply as the people of the sea. They were the infamous Philistines, believed by some to have come from the island of Crete. Does this identify the Philistines as Minoans, and therefore perhaps Atlanteans?
In the biblical histories, the Philistines are said to have entered the land of Canaan from the west, from the sea. The fact is that the Philistines were a foreign people in the Semitic Near East. They were not Semites. They were Greeks with a small g.
Despite their reputation for war and aggression, the Philistines were greatly advanced in the arts, strangely similar to the Minoans.
It's astonishing that in view of the fact that for most people in the world, the word Philistine means a boor and an ignoramus, the fact is that among the most beautiful things I have ever seen are precisely Philistine objects.
Were these works fashioned by the very same hands as those who created the wall frescoes on Crete and Thera? Does the Atlantean legend intersect the great Philistine stories of the Bible? We may never know, but another entirely different theory clings to the craggy cliffs of the Mediterranean here on the Turkish coast. Inland of the coast lie the ruins of yet another civilization, also destroyed during the Bronze Age. The place? The ancient city of Troy. Recent discoveries suggest that Troy, scene of the legendary Trojan War, may have been one and the same as Atlantis.
There are numerous similarities between Homer's description of the Trojan War and Plato's account of Atlantis. Both of them mention 1,200 ships. Both of them mention chariots. Both of them mention bronze weapons, and they both describe in much detail how the armies were organized. The parallels are really overwhelming.
For centuries, Troy, like Atlantis, was only a legend, with no real proof that it ever existed. The poet Homer's description of the Trojan War in the Iliad was considered nothing more than just a good story. But in the 1860s, a wealthy German explorer named Heinrich Schliemann, armed with a copy of Homer's writings as his guide, doggedly began searching the Turkish coast, where the Mediterranean connects with the Black Sea. Within a year, he had unearthed a city that completely matched Homer's description. Troy leapfrogged from being a legend to a fact, almost overnight.
Prior to Heinrich Schliemann, most people felt that the stories about Troy told by Homer and other poets were fanciful inventions. When Schliemann actually found Troy, it made everyone sit up and take notice and say, wait, maybe Greek mythology is not purely invention.
The discovery of Troy fueled a fury of interest in Atlantis. If Troy could be found, why not Atlantis? But even more tantalizing to those searching for Atlantis was the possibility that Plato and Homer could have been talking about the very same place. Might Troy not perhaps be Atlantis? Recent excavations reveal that ditches around Troy match Plato's descriptions of concentric waterways around the Atlantean capital city.
Plato was not a technician or anything like that. He was a philosopher. But he came up with a model, a description of a port system which made perfect sense. The ports were discovered precisely at the place where they should have been according to Plato's account.
Beginning at the sea, they bored a channel right through the outermost circle, and thus they made the entrance to it from the sea, like that to a harbor, by opening out a mouth large enough for the greatest ships to sail through. Plato's Dialogues.
The most compelling similarity between Atlantis and Troy was that of war. In Plato's text, the Atlanteans terrorized the entire Mediterranean, culminating in a long and brutal battle with the Greeks, similar to Homer's description of the Trojan War. In both accounts, the Greeks hold back the invading onslaught, finally freeing the region from the grip of terror. Perhaps this explains one of the mysteries of Plato's account of Atlantis, his abrupt ending to the story.
Plato's Atlantis account stops in mid-sentence, and it's one of the mysteries surrounding it. The whole account gives the impression of something that's polished and edited, but that wouldn't explain why he stopped it.
Could it have been that once Plato realized his account was one and the same as Homer's account of Troy, he decided to abandon its writing? Plato went on to write one more of his famous dialogues, but not another word about Atlantis.